From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast.
The fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation.
I, Prophet of Esports, joined today by my friend and co-host William Collis.
Yeah, we got the book of esports out. It's a big deal.
So everyone knows me as the Prophet and William as the Professor.
From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast. I am Paul Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host William Collis. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you so much for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you for all the love on our social platforms. Thank you for buying Business of Esports merch. Hopefully anyone who bought socks, a hoodie are enjoying them. If you haven't already, go check it out, our Business of Esports merch. Also go check out William's book, The Book of Esports, on Amazon. You got to pick it up if you haven't already. I will hint, book 2 is going to come at some point. I will write more than the prologue.
Book 2 as a whole. We gotta connect on that one, Paul. Book 2,
it's in the works, folks.
So close.
It's in the works.
So close.
But if you also haven't already, make sure, don't forget, every Wednesday evening, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, we do a live stream. It's a lot of fun. William, how was your week?
Yeah, lately, Paul, it's been super busy, super wall to wall, but super fun. I think
you had a big announcement this week. I mean, I hate to sort of cut in.
Yeah, I know. You got to bring it up for me. I
have to bring it up.
I can't self-aggrandize. Yeah, what was my big announcement, Paul?
So for our listeners, William's company was just acquired by Esports Entertainment Group. Big acquisition, $43 million acquisition for the whole, not just William's company, but the whole group of companies. And huge. I mean, great for Esports Entertainment Group, who, by the way, is a sponsor of the podcast, and for William's fantastic company, Genji. Great outcome for everyone, I think.
I think we're all super excited, and we're just really pumped to be, building an even stronger business going forward as part of the EEG family. So, see where that takes us. But we're just very excited. As I said, though, unfortunately, it still just stays busy and gets busier. I think that's the reality of business today, and particularly gaming, because gaming's booming still, which is part of the reason why it's 9 to 9 all the time, so to speak.
I will just say, I've called this now for the last 2 years. I said M&A in that 50 to like $100 million range, or 20 to 80 million, whatever sort of that smaller range is going to really pick up over the next few years. You're going to see a lot of transactions like this. It's a piece of the space I'm really excited about, and you guys fall right into that. Like I said, great for both sides. So congrats. Couldn't have happened to a better guy, William.
Well, it's not just congrats on this. It's congrats to the Business of Esports podcast, because we have 2 phenomenal guests here today, right, Paul?
I was going to say, I feel like this is a milestone for us. People may say sometimes I blow things. I can't sort of blow this out of proportion enough. Probably, I would say the 2 best guests we've ever had on the podcast. Definitely 2 of the biggest, and it's a milestone for us as a podcast. And so without further ado, I want to introduce our 2 guests this week. It's Ujesh Desai, who's the general manager at Logitech Gaming, and Vincent Tucker, who's their head of strategy and innovation at Logitech Gaming. Welcome, guys, to the Business of Esports podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Guys, as our regular listeners know, I'm a hardware fiend. Hardware's my life. I easily have $100,000 of Logitech products just in this room. So, and you just
we got to thank you. We got to thank you then, Paul. You
single-handedly keeping the company afloat.
You have no idea. Like, he has closets that are literally just Logitech products like floor to ceiling. It's insane.
That's awesome. And actually, William, before you even get to that, I was going to say $43 million. Why are you even on this podcast?
Whoa,
Come on, man. I was joking. I thought he'd be on an island somewhere. He'd be on an island sipping a margarita or something.
This is my island, Ujesh. You know, I love doing this. I love Paul, and I think this is honestly, it's going to be a ton of fun chatting to you coming up here. So I'm so pumped, and I have so many questions. You know, for the listeners, we had some banter, you know, pre podcast as we do, and there's like, man, this is going to hit on some high points for me. I'm going to say steel battalions this time.
Ujesh, before we jump into those questions, though. For both of you, I would love for our listeners just to introduce yourselves. We'd love for our listeners to get a bit of background, how you got into gaming, what you're focused on now. I think it would be great to give them some of the context.
Sure. First of all, I'm laughing. I'm looking at everyone's, and I'm the only one that doesn't have my last name, like I'm Beyonce or Cher or something like that. Or
I mean,
I'm aging. I guess I'm aging myself when I say Cher. It's got to be Beyonce or Lady Gaga, but even that is a two-name thing.
You can get away with it, you're the rock star, okay? So you can get away with it.
I don't know about that, but yeah. So I've been in gaming, as you can tell from the gray hairs, for a very long time. So I was 13 and a half years at NVIDIA, where I did a variety of different positions. I was the GeForce GM there for a while. That was super fun. And at the end, I was running corporate marketing there and product marketing. Then I came to Logitech 6 years ago, running the gaming business at Logitech. Myself, I grew up a gamer. It's kind of funny that you even use that term. I think nowadays kids don't even use that term. You know, I have two daughters at home, and my younger one looks, she's like, well, duh, Dad, yeah, I play games. Everyone does. What's wrong with you? You know, but when I was growing up, it was kind of unique, right? Like Atari came out and we didn't have one. We couldn't afford one. So I'd go to my friend's house and play on his Atari. We had the old Commodores where you got I can't even remember, it was a magazine or something. You had to first program the game, right? And you saved it on a little cassette tape before you got to play it. So that's kind of how old I am. But to me, the video games were just something that were just magical. And I'll never forget, like one of the first games I super fell in love with was Pitfall Harry. And today, when you go back and look at Pitfall Harry, you're like, whoa, those graphics are so so lame. But at the time, for a young kid, it was amazing, right? You're like jumping, and then when you fall down, and then you see the scorpions go by or whatever. Then as I grew up, then I was like the arcade kid, you know, so I'd get dropped off at the mall, mostly because I could have a pocket full of quarters and just play, video games. And that was Double Dragon. And I can't remember how many quarters me and my buddy put into Double Dragon. And we just over and over. And when we got to the end, then we realized we had to fight each other to get the girl. We were like, what? It took us a second. And I think he realized before I did, and he kicked my ass, and I ended up losing. And I was very depressed after that. But yeah, just to me, video games have always just been this kind of part of my life. And it's something I did. It was like an escape. And to actually be able to turn that into a career has been pretty amazing. So that's a little bit about myself.
Very cool. And Vincent, how about you? Would love some of your background and how you got into gaming and what you're focused on now.
Yeah, so for me, gaming, much like Ujesh, started very early, and I have, at the beginning, it's very similar, right? I got an arcade console that was a hand-me-down from my neighbor that was called a Fairchild, right? This is sort of right around the same time or just before Atari, kind of in that time frame. Played a lot of that had a lot of similar games like Combat and what have you. And then started getting into PC gaming a little bit. And, went to college and went to university and stuff like that, and spent a fair share playing games in the PC lab instead of doing other things that I should have been doing, playing all sorts of different games. My first job in gaming was actually, I was working at a company called Virtual World, where they had an array of cockpits in a space, right? And they would set you up, and you'd play a BattleTech or Mech Warrior kind of game against each other. Within that time period, there were lots of, there were the local matches, but we had the internet before the internet where we'd site link. So our site in San Diego would connect to the site in Chicago, and 2 teams of 4 would go after it, and there would be world championships and stuff like that. And I managed some of those, managed some of the esports that we had there, or what we would call esports today that we had there. And then I transitioned over to Mad Cats and started working on physical products. Did that for about 7 years, and then I came to Logitech, and I've been at Logitech for about a little over 16 years, and I'm
Wow.
responsible for all the products that we make in the gaming space.
So you guys have both been at Logitech quite a while. I'm curious from either of you. I would love some perspective in terms of what you think from a gaming focus has changed within the company, like over the last 5 or 10 years. Like, has there been, I've been a lifelong gamer, right? Hardcore PC gamer my whole life. But as an investor, gaming never struck me as sort of the place to focus my efforts. I was always building companies in tech or investing companies in sort of broader tech. And only sort of 3 or 4 years ago did I realize, wait a second, and Ujesh, you brought it up, like this thing that I used to do in the basement with my brother growing up, all of a sudden now it's cool, it's mainstream, right? Like you can actually tell people about it. Did a similar transformation happen at Logitech? Has the company always had a focus on gaming, or is it just so much stronger and bigger over the last 5 years? Just, I would love like some of the history internally.
I think I'll let Vincent go first because he's been there 16 years. So he can tell you some of the background, and then I can pick up, over the last 6 years, some of the
Sure.
stuff we've done. If maybe that would be a good way to do it.
Perfect.
Yeah, so previous to Ujesh's arrival, what I would say is that, Logitech has always done input devices that sort of surround the PC and other electronic equipment, right? So, and we've always pursued performance, right? There used to be posters that hung in the office. It's like what we cover is the last inch between your real life and the digital world, right? So we were always driven by performance. We were always driven by trying to create a kind of experience that somebody could really get behind, like accuracy and precision. The trouble is that with gaming way back in the day, and you probably remember this, there were all these headlines, I don't know, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. It's like PC gaming is dead. PC gaming is dead, right? And that was all based on, what? There aren't any boxes flying off the shelves from your local retailer, right? Meanwhile, every one of us that's a gamer, we had just said, well, why don't I just buy all my games from Steam? Because that's way easier. I don't have to deal with anything, right? And nobody saw that. So I would say that in the gaming group, which was, it was a sizable group, and we were delivering good revenue to the company, but I don't think we understood it as well as we could have understood it, or what the growth opportunities were.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a good place for me to pick up, because that I was at NVIDIA, and I saw NVIDIA. Obviously, PC gaming is growing like crazy for NVIDIA. And NVIDIA had a different business model. Like, we're not at Logitech, we were big into retail. We went through adding card partners who were in retail, right? So
Yep.
I'm not looking at NPD reports like I guess some of the folks at Logitech were, and Logitech missed like the Steam sales because NPD doesn't cover that, right?
Yep.
We're looking at the number of chips we're selling to adding card partners in the Far East, and our business was on fire, when I was there, and it still is. I mean, NVIDIA is doing phenomenally well, and I have tons of friends that still work there. So my story picked up where after 13 and a half years there, kind of wanted to change, and I won't go into any of the details, but I had some personal things I was dealing with at home with my family and my parents that I had to take some time off to take care of. And that's when Bracken, the CEO, who I think, Paul, you've talked to, reached out, and he said, hey, I have this opportunity to run the gaming business at Logitech. And I thought to myself, I've always been a Logitech fan. I've my Logitech mice, I love my Logitech mouse. I have my Logitech, camera. I started looking around the house after he called me, and I'm like, man, I own a lot of Logitech stuff. And you kind of don't even realize I got the speakers, I got the mouse, I got the keyboard, I got the webcam. I even had a Harmony remote. I'm like, there's a lot of Logitech product I own. So, I met with him, and I don't know if he's told you the story, but he has kids as well.
Mhm.
And so when he joined, he kind of saw Logitech, how they used to be big in gaming, and they kind of not shut it down, because they never shut it down. They had the engineers, they were still doing a lot of great work. They weren't just focused on it as much as they could have been. And his kids were like, Dad, what are you doing, man? Logitech is a great brand. And then when he talked to me, I'm like, yeah, Logitech has a great brand. And he's like, well, would you like to come join us? We're really building up the design team. We're getting the kind of band back together, pulling all the engineers that were passionate about gaming into a dedicated gaming group. And we're going to call it Logitech G. And do you want to kind of help run it? And that was in October of 2014. And it's been a phenomenal ride. And myself and Vincent have had a lot of fun. And once again, I know we said Vincent, we're joking around about code names or nicknames in the beginning. He should be called Vincent the Product Tucker, because we work really closely with him, and he, it's like we're kids in a candy store, right? We get to go dream up the products that we want to take home and play with ourselves. How cool of a job is that?
I mean, what I love is it feels so much more than just a marketing exercise too, right? Like, and I have personal experience here. I was a hardcore Logitech user for my PC for like a decade, right? And then Razer shows up on the scene with their first mouse, the boom slang,
Yeah.
and they're saying this is for gamers, and I'm going, wow, I'm a gamer, right? I got to have this mouse, right? And it wasn't necessarily any better than my Logitech mouse, didn't perform any better, but because they targeted me specifically, I became a buyer, right? I
Yeah.
think the beauty, at least with Logitech G, is it's not just a marketing exercise, right? You're not just slapping a G on the same mouse and going to market with it. These are products designed and built for gamers, right? It's
Yeah.
not.
Oh, in fact, the first tagline we had when I joined, this shows kind of how nerdy we were. Our tagline was "Game with passion, win with science." I mean, that was literally
Bit of a
so.
mouthful.
So clearly, we weren't good marketing guys. Let me just tell you, marketing was not the forte. But what we were trying to communicate with that was like, like we just love gaming, right? And the way we're building these products, we're designing them, we're engineering them, uh, in a very curated, crafted way, because they're the stuff that we want to take home and use ourselves. We didn't want to just slap logos on things. We weren't just slapping blinky lights everywhere. We really wanted to solve some problems. And when you look at that, that's why, one of the things that, Vincent and I talked about with the engineering team and the design team, it's like you look at Xbox and PlayStation, and everyone's got wireless controllers. But in PC, no one was using wireless. And
Yeah.
we're like, why is that? And they're like, oh, lag, latency, it sucks, man. You're going to lose in Counter-Strike. Every millisecond counts. And you know what? They were kind of right. We started looking at some of the wireless mice that were out there, and especially if you went to Bluetooth, they were horrible.
Yeah.
So we kind of challenged the engineering team. Hey, what if we made a wireless mouse that was faster than the competition's wired? And that's what we did with Lightspeed. And then we said, hey, we solved that. And a bunch of gamers came to us and said, okay, you solved that, but now I'm in the middle of, I'm in a raid with my guild. I'm the healer, and then the freaking battery dies. They're going to kill me. So then we said, okay, well, we better fix that. And then we invented power play, which is electromagnetic resonance charging. And unlike a Qi charger, it's charging your mouse while it's at play or at rest. And those are things that if you weren't a gamer and you didn't play yourself, you wouldn't figure out how to solve those kind of things. And I think that's what we did. And then you can put the marketing behind it afterwards, but we've never approached it as a marketing first company. We've always approached it as a design, engineering. What do we want to build for ourselves first? And then we can market around it.
Did those solutions come like internally? Like, folks on Vincent's team maybe who, say, I'm a gamer, I have this problem, like let's solve this? Or do you guys work with outsiders? Like, are you bringing in esports pros? Are you bringing in, gamers from the outside? I'm curious what the model is from an engineering and product design perspective.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what I would say is both. At some level, right? I work with a small team, to be honest, right? There's only about 6 of us on the product team. We're supported by, top-notch, world-class marketing organization and top-notch, world-class, some of the smartest people I've ever met on the engineering team. And early on, most of the products that we were doing were for me or for Chris or for Mark, people that are, or for Kate, people that are on the team, right? And at some level, we were lucky enough that there were a lot of people that liked games just as much as we did, right? And they needed the same things that we did. But on top of that, as the market grows, as more and more people discover gaming and what it can be, and how it's sort of this, this common tapestry between everyone who's ever played games, right? No matter what game you've played, you just have this common tapestry. You have these moments out of games that are like, I did that kind of thing, right? So we bring lots of those people in. Recently, just before you just started, we had forayed into esports space as a sponsor to a few teams. Among them was Cloud9 and TSM. And the objective of that from a product perspective was, these people are at the highest echelon of gaming. They have the most rigorous needs. They're going to put it through the most rigorous testing and performance requirements, just like you would equate this to a professional football player, a professional tennis player, or any other professional sport. It's the same. So we really wanted to reach out to these professionals and say, what is it about the best product that we've made that's right? What's wrong? Please tell us. And on top of that, just with the gaming community, you couldn't imagine how much time we spend on Reddit or on any of the other
Which can
community
be a bit of a
forums.
black hole.
It can be,
It
but
can be pretty painful too sometimes. But
it can be. But the great thing about the gaming community, in my opinion, is they'll tell you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you almost don't have to ask for it, because they are so passionate about it. They will give you feedback.
On our first call, I complained about something.
He did. Literally on the prep call, the first words out of him, "Nice to meet you. By the way, why did you do this on the product?" He literally complained. So it's like, okay, well, thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. I will add one thing that what Vincent said. Like, so when we first started working with the esports teams, I think some of the teams were surprised, like, because we sponsored them and they thought we're going to come in and like replace all their gear.
Yep.
And some of the players way back then, they weren't happy with some of our products. And we said, that's okay. Like, you mean we can use someone else's mouse or keyboard if we want to? We're like, yeah, I'm not gonna. It'd be worse if I force you to use it and then you lose. That's not gonna do anyone any good. So can you tell me what you like about your current one, what you don't like about your current one, what you don't like about ours, what you wish we would do in ours? And that's how we kind of went on that journey over the last 6 years. And that led to our pro line that we built and we designed with the players. And now it's one of the top selling lines out there. And most of the top teams and players use our stuff. But that's what we want. We want it to be genuine. We don't want to be like, here's a check, we're going to force you to use our stuff.
I mean, that brings up an interesting topic completely. And William, I don't know if you were going there, but the authenticity being so critical for reaching that gamer audience. And I'm curious how you guys have navigated that. Is it something you're always thinking about, always, concerned that are we really being authentic to this audience? And sort of second question related to that, it also sounds like you're extremely vertically integrated, right? Like from the esport pro all the way up to marketing and engineering and design and everything in between. It sounds like there's a really interesting vertically integrated pipeline to get products to market. How does that sort of fit next to Logitech proper, right? That is bringing their own products to market and may share engineering resources or things like that? Like,
yeah. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about the authentic stuff, and I can have Vincent chime in as well. On the authentic stuff, a lot of it comes down to the team itself. Like, Vincent wasn't kidding. Vincent, Chris on his team, I mean, they go deep. Chris especially, like, goes, and Vincent can laugh when I say he goes deep down the Reddit hole, and he takes it very, very personally. To sometimes I have to like counsel him and say, like, Chris, it's okay, but he's like, no, I want to make it better. I know we can make it better. And that's awesome. What I love about him is how, and it's not just him, there's a lot of people on the team that like the products are like their babies. Yeah. So that really helps with the authenticity. Me personally, the other thing that helps with the authenticity is I now have a daughter who's a massive gamer.
That's
and
cool.
If you ever have a daughter, and I don't know if any of you have children, children are very honest, and they're even more honest when they know they control their parents. Like, so I would bring stuff home and she'd be like, that sucks, Dad. I don't like that. She's like super, super honest and brutal. So you talk about authentic feedback. I'm getting a lot of authentic feedback in the home. So that's kind of some of the things that we do. And then in terms of, I'll talk high level about vertical integration and turn it to Vincent, but Logitech's great from that sense. Like Bracken, he came from P&G, which was one of the places he worked at, and he believes in this multi-category, multi-brand kind of house. And no one's really done that in the tech space, and Logitech is doing that now. So he gives us the freedom to be very, very authentic and real and get vertically integrated because he understands the value of that.
At the same time, right, there's this this opportunity for leverage, right? It's like, we're a fairly big company, right? And Logitech creativity and productivity does mice, and they do webcams, and they do keyboards, just like gaming does, right? And there's a lot of engineering horsepower that's right there. So if one of us runs into a problem because we're trying to solve this new unique problem, or try to deliver this new and unique experience, we can get a lot of really smart people on it really fast to sort of work it out, right? And we can explore all kinds of different avenues, but we always end up trying to deliver what the best thing is, and getting back to authenticity, right? A lot of that is, the authenticity is, we just want to do the truth, which is, again, I was here when we had, science wins is one of our taglines, right? That's because we put so much effort into the engineering, right? So for us, it's just about the truth, right? It's about how can we go? Like, we just upgraded all of our hero mice so that they can go up to 25,600 DPI, which is sub-micron level accuracy, right? Not many people are going to use 25,000 DPI.
I was going to say, is anyone running them at that?
For my Heroes of the Storm games, I absolutely would. That's
well,
the
actually,
reason I use right now. That's why I'm using.
Actually, I'll tell you one of the cool things, and one of the reasons we did that as well, the accessibility space. So we made our adaptive gaming kit, and when we did that, we went on this journey and we met with folks like Steve Spawn at Able Gamers, Dr. Mick over at Special Effect in the UK. And that's where we learned some of the folks with fine motor skill issues, having that level of DPI could help them immensely.
Interesting.
And we had never
application.
We had never thought about that.
Yeah.
And then once again, that goes back to, I can't show it here. I got my jacket on, but like when I joined, I truly believe, and I told the gaming team, I think life is more fun when you play. I really believe that, and I believe it so much, it's literally tattooed on the inside of my forearm. And I get a big gaming half sleeve here of my favorite video games. So I've got, God of War, I've got Lara Croft, and I've got Ciri from The Witcher 3.
Very nice.
And then it says, life is more fun when you play.
Legitimate now. This is legitimate.
It's legit. And I told the team, if we believe life is more fun when you play, then we mean everyone should be able to play. And that's what led us to do things like the adaptive gaming kit and look at things like 25,000, DPI settings. So I don't know. That's just some of the things that we do.
I'm still waiting on the Power Play mouse pad that's desk size, but I'm not gonna say anything. I will just put it out there to the universe.
My PR team would say I cannot comment on any unannounced products.
Says Vincent the Product Tucker.
William, go ahead. I know you wanted to jump in here.
No. This is your moment, Paul. This is like wheelhouse to go crazy. So I know I need to let you dive in. But I have to ask, because like all of this focus on performance and basically like the scientific accuracy and the underlying mechanical engineering quality of the product is kind of at odds with another focus I've seen in the gaming hardware space. And here I get to use my favorite Bill Gates quote, which comes up like a million times: leadership in colors, right? It's exemplified by this like RGB lighting, chroma sync, like, all of this stuff that like looks the part of being a gamer, right? And to be honest, that seems like, as an outsider, a major piece of the category too, right? It seems like there's a significant number of people who are buying or looking at, oh, it lights up purple, red, and I gotta go. So how does that fit in, and how does that kind of, I guess you would say, like, again, it's the leadership in colors, like the appearance marketing factor into how Logitech thinks about products and product development.
Yeah, I think to me, it's like I want to say partly it's generational, but I think it's just more than that. It's just it, personalization, right? People want to stand out and be different. Like, I don't know if you could see here on the the podcast, but I have the AirPod Pros in, but I got them painted black just because I wanted
Interesting.
to be different. So mine are painted black. They're
I was
not
going to
the
say you
normal.
You need RGB ones at some
I
point, right?
do need RGB
Have
ones,
someone on Vincent's team figure this out. You just
I can't
but
make any comments on unannounced products.
but I think it comes down to, I mean, people want to personalize, right? They want to make things their own, and I think gamers especially, right? I know me, I less so now as I'm older, but when I was younger, that would be my way of turning off from work. I'd come home and I'd have my dedicated gaming area, and I'd have, you know, my wife laughed at me because I had an Elvis phone on my desk, and when it rang, he sang Hound Dog, and it's just like, but that was my like area, where it was my place to go and unwind, and my private little cove slash cave. And I think a lot of gamers, that is their kind of place where they know, okay, I can turn off the work, I can relax. And if they see the headset and it has RGB, we've talked to some of the gamers, it's like they know, okay, I'm going to a gaming place now. And when I put that headphone on, it's like I'm putting the helmet in the game. And when I get the mouse is like my sword, and I'm entering that fantasy world. And it's a way to get some escapism. And my wife's never been huge into video games, but she loves movies. And I think she finally got it one day when I explained to her. I said, she said, "Why do you like games so much?" And I said, "Well, because to me, just like you like watching a movie, when I play a game, it's like a movie, only I am the hero in the movie." And
Yep.
she's like, "Oh, I get it. That makes sense."
But just to expand on William's question, in one of our very early podcasts, I think we equated like gaming hardware and the industry around gaming hardware almost to like the golf industry, where people are willing to pay, right? Sometimes big dollars if they think it will help them win, right? Or it will help them get better. And in some cases, the move towards Ujesh, what you call personalization and like RGB lighting and everything blinged out, can sometimes be at odds with performance, right? You add RGB lights to something, you increase the weight of the mouse, for example.
Yep.
Maybe that's not as good for performance. And so, maybe this is a question for Vincent. Sort of, how do you guys think through that kind of trade-off, right? Performance versus looks, internally as you develop new products.
So, there's when you do product development, there's sort of this idea around, what are you going to choose? You're going to choose cost, schedule, or experience. At some level, we choose three every single time.
Okay.
We just have to, right? I mean, one of the best performing products that we've ever done
Yep.
was the G502.
Still today, some of my friends' favorite mouse. And you put the new hero sensor in it, right? Brought it back, gave it new life.
We chose three. It was accessible. It was inexpensive enough that, it was sub $100, right? Well, we packed all kinds of value into that one mouse. But that's our approach, right? I mean, there are gamers from every socioeconomic background. And again, keeping in mind, we all have this common tapestry behind us, right? We've all had our moments in games, right? And we're all better when we play, as you just said, right? We're our best selves when we're playing, right? We're the most inquisitive, we're the most curious, we're the most collaborative, right? So for us, it's about choosing three, every single one of them.
And I'll build on that off of the G502, because to further answer your question, Paul, it's really going deep back to what you said about being vertically integrated and understanding the customer. Because what we found out is some of the pros, and back to that story I used when we said we didn't force them to use it, some of the pros didn't like the 502.
Yep.
Because they said, it's heavy, it's got weights. I don't need the weights. It's got 11 buttons. I don't need 11 buttons. And that was like insight that we're like, oh. And that's when we realized, when we started really researching some of the pros, especially the FPS players, it's kind of like your race car drivers. Like if you and I could afford it, I know William can now because he just got acquired, but like we would, if we bought a sports car, we'd buy that Audi R8 with the heated seats. Like that thing is badass. What, Iron Man. Oh, sorry. I hope I was allowed to say that on the podcast.
Totally.
But that's like what Iron Man, rides. That thing is awesome.
Yep.
Right. But the race car drivers, they have what the F1, which is like fiberglass or whatever, carbon, like super lightweight, no bells and whistles. It doesn't have a cup holder. They want to just go as fast as possible. And that's kind of what we learned. And that was the insight that led to us building the Pro mouse. If you look at that Pro mouse, it is very stripped down and very different than the G502.
So it's interesting. So you look at the trade-offs sort of across the whole product line, right? And figure out we can build something for every sort of interest or every what everyone prefers, every preference.
It's that authenticity and going deep and really understanding who you're building for.
So on that feedback front, right, and listening to feedback, I have a question. I guess I'll phrase it two ways, and you can choose which one is the more interesting way to answer. I guess I'd be curious, what is the most surprising or unexpected or unintuitive piece of feedback you've ever gotten about a Logitech product that's made you kind of go like, oh, well, I would have never thought of it that way. Like I think that the high micron count or the submicron DPI was an interesting example. Are there other ones like that that jump out? Because I think it's really helpful for listeners who are trying to understand the depth and the detail that goes into producing these products, right? It's not just like, oh, make it lighter or make the battery life longer. Like there really is a whole bunch of planning and depth that goes far beyond even the basic functionality. Is there another thing that jumps out or an interesting story there that might be worth sharing?
I have one that jumps out at me. You want to go first, Vincent, or you want me to? Okay. So the one that jumped out at me is we did some research one time, and the name of the company we did it with is blanking. That's not super important, but we really wanted to do, and I always screw these up. They call them like quantitative and qualitative research, right? So quant is you're like interviewing as many people as you possibly can, right, to kind of get an understanding, and then qualitative can just be a very small number of people when you go really, really deep. So we're doing a qual, just a small group of people. And one of the people we talked to was talking about the G502. And we were trying to understand, like, what is it that people love so much about that mouse? Like, how did that explode? I know we looked at those three things that Vincent mentioned, but even then it's exploded, like sometimes even beyond our wildest dreams. And this person was talking, and he was talking about how I love the thumb rest. And the interviewer was like, well, can you expand on that? He's like, yeah, because typically when I have a mouse, they don't really have that in my thumb drags. And when I'm like deep and lost in my fantasy game, I want to feel like I'm in the game because I just want to tune out the rest of the world. And just that little bit of dragging my thumb on the mouse makes me realize, oh, I'm playing a video game. I'm not really the hero.
Interesting that it broke the immersion.
I was like, damn, I never would have thought about that. I thought it was just a thumb rest. Like there's this emotional connection. And until you talk to some of these gamers and you really go deep and understand, you miss that. And that was really, it's similar to the 25,000 DPI, but in a different sense. Like you just don't understand unless you really get that emotional connection and understand what it is that really motivates them and gets them excited.
How do you guys look at the competitive landscape right now? Because I would say even in the last 5 years, like I don't think we even need to go further back than that. In the last 5 years, you got a lot of companies now making gaming mice and a lot of companies making gaming headsets and gaming keyboards and sort of all the categories you guys are in. And I would argue we're clear leaders in for a very long time. Now they're sort of crowded spaces. I'm curious how you guys think about what has happened from a competitive standpoint and sort of how Logitech and you guys are thinking about, where we separate or how we separate ourselves from the rest.
Yeah. One, I love it. I welcome it, right? The more people that are there, the more it's going to push us to do better and not get complacent. So to me, I love it.
You just, I'm just going to stop you there. Great business lesson, because we are a business podcast after all. For people listening, never be afraid of the competition. You got to have Ujesh's attitude all the time. Like, anyway,
yeah,
sorry.
we welcome it, right? Because otherwise you could get complacent. You could fall back to your laurels, right? You could just be sitting there like enjoying the fruits of your labor. And Bracken tells us all the time we need to be humble, and hungry. And I think we truly are. So I welcome the competition. Also, the more competition there is, it shows that the more this market is growing. Back to when you said you weren't even looking at a business, you were looking at other tech stuff. Gaming is a real business. In fact, what I've seen about gaming, and I think this is true, and you should probably go back. This could be one of your future podcasts. Go back and chart it. But my sense in all the years I've been in gaming has been one of those things that, for the most part, knock on wood, has also been pretty recession proof. Because when you're not going out to dinner, you're not going out to the movies, you're not spending on this, you buckle down. Well, guess what? You're staying at home. And when you're staying at home, you're looking at things to do. Well, how about I play games to keep myself entertained? So we've been relatively recession proof as well. So I think gaming is just one of those things. And then as it has exploded, right? And now it's on your mobile devices. It's kind of like what I said at the very, very beginning of the podcast. Like my daughter, she'll go, "Okay, Dad, I'm a gamer," but she never used that term. It's like me when I grew up. Like, my parents didn't have TV, but I did, and I watched a lot of TV, the Saturday morning cartoons, and the TV was my babysitter after school. But I didn't call myself a TVer.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm that TVer. It's like, no, I watched TV. But I did call myself a gamer because it was very unique at the time. And my daughter's the same way. She's like, "Yeah, Dad, everyone plays games. Can you just knock it off? What's the big deal?" So anyway,
yeah,
I welcome the competition.
And from a competitive positioning standpoint, is there any way sort of Logitech thinks about where you stand relative to the rest? Is it this focus on science, focus on best in class products, performance, things like that? Or is the positioning, thinking different?
Yeah, if we were going to draw the traditional marketing brand pyramid, sorry, the
Yeah.
traditional market, what would be in our top box there?
I think I'd like to say I start with being welcoming, inclusive.
Right.
Because I will say the one thing, if I could, we'll add it up now, whatever, 18, 19 years of being in gaming, which I love and I'm proud that I was made a career out of. The one thing I have been embarrassed about sometimes is when you see the internet trolls and the haters that are out there. And I'd like to tell myself, which is the only way I can stay sane about it, is that it's a vocal, a small, very loud vocal group, but it's small. It's not how everyone in gaming feels. So, I've said this, and thankfully everyone at Logitech feels the same way because they all have the same values. We just want everyone to have fun and play. And I think it might sound cheesy, but I do think that's what separates us from some of the other gaming companies that, no offense, but it's going back to way back in the podcast when you talked about marketing led, it seems like a lot of times they're talking to angry 13-year-old boys. Everything is a death this or a widow that. And it's like, we're trying to, like, we make a G502. I mean, what does that even mean? Right.
It's true. It's an interesting insight. Yeah.
It's a G and a number, right? I mean, we really are making this stuff because we want people to play and have fun. And I think then if it was just that would be not enough. So then we back that up with the design and the science. But I think it really comes to that. We want to welcome everyone. And if you look at the world from that lens, then you would partner with a Microsoft and go build an adaptive gaming kit, right?
Yep.
Even though from a revenue standpoint, because this is the business of esports, who knows what the revenue is going to be on that, but who cares? It's the right thing to do.
On this point, what was some of the thinking? I'm a Herman Miller fanboy. I'm sitting in a Herman Miller M body. I have the Logitech one at my office. So what was the thinking behind that partnership? Because you're talking there about a big ticket item, very different from most of the stuff you guys sell that is, $100 or less type of, accessory. What was the thought process behind that? And was it very different? Was it outside of sort of the normal Logitech gaming, product process?
So I hope I don't get in trouble for telling this story, but I'll tell. Maybe I'll censor it a little bit. So it started with Bracken talking to Herman Miller, and they were talking about something totally different, right? Other businesses, like stuff, because we have a big video conferencing business.
Yep.
And while they're at dinner, I think one of the gentlemen from Herman Miller, I forget who, was talking to Bracken and saying, hey, my niece, I know you have a gaming business, and my niece or my nephew or something like that, like, is really into gaming. Isn't that kind of crazy? And then that's when Bracken's like, no, it isn't. It's a really big business, and you know how much we do, and here's why. And now that I think about it, you guys are in furniture. Why don't you do gaming desks and chairs? And that was kind of how it all started. So Bracken came back from that trip, and which happens a lot. It's kind of like what happened with you. I get a random email. It's like, hey, you got to talk to this Paul guy. All right, see you, Jesh. So I got a similar thing. It's like, hey, you got to talk to these guys at Herman Miller. I'm like, okay, why? He goes, oh, it'll be great. Just give him a call. So that's kind of how
The
it
final
all.
product is incredible. It's the best gaming chair on the market, right? So
So that's literally how it started. Go ahead, Vincent.
I was just going to say, I love mine. Bought mine from Herman Miller, arrived over Christmas break, and I haven't gotten out of it since. It's awesome.
Yeah, I'm in mine here too. But basically, that's kind of how it started. And then we went on a journey. Me, an engineer and a designer, we flew out there, met with their team, like started showing them some of the statistics about how big gaming is, showed them how long some of these streamers have to actually sit at their desk, similar to an office worker, in some cases more than an office worker. Show them some of the esports players and how, like, just like a basketball player, they have gear. Well, this is part of your gear. So then they brought in expertise in posture. We brought in expertise in how gamers play. We brought in teams like TSM that we sponsor. We had this kitchen and we co-developed it together. We put the players in it. We saw their posture. We saw how they sit. We saw how they get hot. And we came up with a different memory foam and the gel. And it was a truly collaborative effort. And once again, it went back to going deep to try to solve a problem for a specific user. And then ideally, it also turns into stuff that we would obviously use ourselves, as me and Vincent are showing off here. We all on the team love the chair, and you. So that's how that came about.
It's fascinating because it's the sort of thing that only Logitech could bring to market in my mind. Like, not just the brand power, to get behind a $1,500 chair and have the credibility. I feel like you need the years that Logitech has been sort of providing value to gamers to be able to do something like that and not get ripped apart. I think it was fascinating. I did not expect it from Logitech, and I don't know how it did for you guys, but I know personally everyone who's bought the chair has loved it. So I'm curious, Vincent, your thoughts on future trends around. You don't have, obviously, I'm not asking what Logitech has in the pipeline, although I would love to know. But future trends in terms of that, like the big trends that you're seeing from a product standpoint, specifically that you guys are looking at, following, are excited about, et cetera.
So one of the things that I'm personally very excited about, right, is the sort of rollout of cloud gaming, sort of writ large, right? And I know there's lots of people that are doing lots of different things in this space and exploring it and probing it. And there's also an expectation that it's like the tipping point is going to be when 5G really rolls out. But for me, that's the one thing that I'm really looking at kind of a high level personally that I'm excited about. When it comes to products and things like that, I've been on this journey for a long time with you, Jesh, right? And he mentioned earlier about the wireless life we all live but didn't recognize in gaming. And for me, I'm still working towards having a completely wireless desktop, completely wireless, right? So that for me is very exciting. And taking the steps that we've taken with PowerPlay, with developing the wireless technology, integrating that first into mice, then into keyboards and headsets, making sure that they perform at the highest specifications, so there's no latency in the response rates and things like that. So there's none of this, audio is like dubbed and weird, and it's breaking you out of your experience, akin to the your thumb rubbing on the mouse pad. But right now, my entire desktop is wireless, except for my power play, which has the one cord that goes to the back of the PC. But that's what I'm really excited about, is just living that life of complete wirelessness and
Yep.
looking forward to the future of cloud gaming and being able to play anywhere on any kind of screen.
That is a great point. I've never thought, like, there are wires nowhere else in my life except when I game. It is really true. Like, I'm just looking around right now and I'm like, yeah, wow, yeah, that is way more wires than I think I need. Yeah.
I'm just throwing it out there. A power play pad, very large, charges my keyboard and my mouse and my headset if I put it down on the pad. I'm just free ideas for Logitech.
Well,
That's so funny.
I get to throw one out here now too, which is I brought up at the beginning, and I have to ask this because I do think there has been a trend driven by performance in the industry towards, and I don't say simplicity, but maybe towards elegance, right? Like this idea that lighter is better. Simply, I think Ujesh, you brought up the point. The programmers don't need the 11 buttons, right? They'd
Yeah.
much rather have the 4 or 5 buttons that they need, and in some sense, it's function leading form, right?
Yeah.
But I remember that Steel Battalion's controller very, very fond because it was so
For
ridiculous.
working that in, William, for working that in.
Oh, I'm not letting any chance. There's like 3 things I'll bring up. Here's the Storm, Soul Reaver, and Steel Battalions. Those would be my, like three hills that I'll. But no, but seriously, and it like I remember that very fun. Not because I think it is design elegance or perfection or even, dare I say, not over engineering, right? But like I think it goes back to the point of view is the fantasy is like it's just so unfantasy to walk into something that large and heavy and immersive, and it's the an analogy or the analogous to the thumb dragging on the mouse pad. It's like that writ large is like that. You no longer, your body isn't even the thumb now because everything. I'm curious, do you guys ever see those sort of heavy, expansive peripherals coming back as a category, given the other trends? I'm just curious.
So what I would say, I mean, I'll take a stab at it, and you, Judge, maybe you could dig me out later, right? But what I would say is that what you're using the Steel Battalion's controller as an analog for immersion. And for a couple of years, I led an initiative across Logitech initiative, and we were looking at VR. And we did, we were looking at lots of different things and trying to figure out what the intersection point for Logitech could be in the VR space. Now, everybody knows that, VR was in the hype cycle and it didn't turn out to be what it was as quickly as everyone expected. But I would say that level of immersion, we're on the precipice of that level of immersion. Now, whether or not it takes the shape of being a big Steel Battalion's controller, or if it takes the shape of we figure out how to do elegant haptics with hand controllers so that you can interact with buttons and you feel that. Those are, to me, that's the same thing. You're talking about the same thing. And it's up to us to figure out how is it that we go from, everything happens in front of me on the screen and complete the circle or complete the story again, like you just said, if you can really put yourself into the hero shoes and really be in the environment.
Yeah,
It's all about immersion.
I think you said it best, Vincent. It's all about immersion, and I'll build on that, and I'll give you a story and I'll tie it to business to make it a little bit funny, hopefully. So one of the acquisitions we did when I first joined was we acquired Cytec from Mad Cats. And part of the reason I was super interested in Cytec is we had a very big, strong steering wheel business at Logitech, still do. And we said, okay, well, there's driving sim, there's flight sim. They had the Cessna, the yoke and pedal, and then the HOTAS. So that's what I really had my eyes on. But Cytec didn't want to carve out everything. They said, okay, if you're going to buy it, you got to take everything. So I said, fine, give us everything. Well, we take everything, and next thing you know, this thing shows up. I'm like, what the heck is that? And it was a farming simulator wheel with the side panel. I'm like, what is this? And who does this? And then for Halloween one year, we have the tradition at Logitech. Halloween's a big thing at Logitech, by the way. And so for Halloween, every group gets to decorate their area, and we shut down for the day. and people go through all the different areas, and people go crazy. I remember the first year I joined, because I didn't know what to expect. So I didn't wear a costume or anything. I literally was 1 week on the job. I think I started the week before Halloween. And I went, and on the second floor, they had literally bought in bales of hay and had a mechanical bull that you could ride. It was insane. It was just, I mean, they go all out. So the one year we all dressed up, and we had different, we took a bunch of our gaming gear, but we had someone, dress up like a pilot and you could try to fly. We had someone dress up like a race car driver. I volunteered to be the farmer. So I came in dressed up in farm. We filled the whole room with bales of hay, and we had the whole farm sim set up. That thing was so much fun. And it's because of the immersion. I was lost for hours there, backing up and like filling up the crate and driving it on. And it was all back there. And I'm like, man, I love this. This might be my new favorite peripheral. And I think it really comes into that immersion side. It's the immersion that really, really helps you.
Guys, before we move on to just like one short news story, because that's the format of this podcast, I just have one question for you guys, which is one last question, which is big like wins or like big successes or failures over the years that you guys have been at Logitech. Anything that stands out for you? Anything that's sort of a good story or good learning for our audience from either a huge success or a huge failure? Usually good learnings come out of either one of those.
Or put another way, is there a question you wish we'd asked you that you think might have an interesting answer that you'd want the listeners to hear?
Well, I mean, there's lots of things we failed on, just to be quite honest. But I think that's okay, because if you're not failing, you're not taking risk and you're not learning. So that's, and we can, if you want, we could send you the list of products that we had that have failed, but it's a long list. I think, to me, you got to try new things. And when you're asking Vincent, where do we think the future, without naming new products and things like that. So this thing I'm going to talk about is out there, although we haven't done a lot of publicity around it, but you can find it. If you go to something called playmaster.gg, we're actually building coaching and training software for Counter-Strike.
Interesting.
And we'll see how it goes. That's a complete test. It could fail miserably, or it could be something that works really well. Because once again, we think esports and training and coaching and understanding that if you really want to get better and you want to get more and more vertically integrated, you maybe do more than just the hardware. And Vincent, the product Tucker, led that team as well. And it was just a small team, and they were doing it as a side project. And every couple months they would show it to me, and they had another proto and another proto and another proto. And they got it to a point where I'm like, that looks pretty cool. Let's put it out there. Let's just see how it does.
Yeah.
So we have about 8 skills right now that people can run through. And the idea is that they go through those skills on a daily basis, and it's kind of like coaching and training and help to make them better. So we'll see. I maybe next time you have me on the podcast, like, man, that was the biggest failure we ever had, Paul. But we learned a lot from it. But
that is a trend, though. It's an interesting trend.
Or it could be super successful. And I'm personally excited about it, because I do think, if Logitech can get behind it and we can do it right and partner with some of our esports teams to really build it out, it could be something really valuable. Because I think, my neighbor, he's very progressive. His son wanted to be a professional Counter-Strike player, but he wanted to take a year off from high school. And his dad was going to let him, but he didn't know. He came to me. He's like, hey, you're in gaming. Should I let him? How do I know if he's good or not? Yeah. And I'm like, it's kind of hard to tell. You can't send a kid to camp. You don't have there is no soccer camp or anything like that. So that's what got me and Vincent thinking, what if parents or kids wanted to be an esports player? How do you go build that career? And maybe that's something we can go help figure out.
So I know William's bullish on this because he started a company in the space.
Super bullish. Yeah. I started one of the first coaching platforms, Gamer Sensei. So I love education and mastery in the space. I think it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah. But it's a trend I've been sort of seeing more broadly too, where you have hardware guys, now trying to launch software and services, leveraging their gamer audience, right? You have a very loyal following of gamers, launching software and services to that fan base makes a lot of sense. So I love this.
I just want to interject one thing on that, though, Paul, is you just gave you the short version of the story. Me and a very small team have been working on this for about 5 years. And the way we approached it was we started doing research, like actual scientific, research in the field. Like, what does it mean to become better at gaming, right? It's when you think about esports, right? The sort of the best and worst advice you can get today is if you want to be an esports professional, play more, right? It's sort of the get good mentality, right?
Yeah.
And that's not how you do it in any other sport, right? Like if you take basketball for example, what you play around and kids and you go to playgrounds and stuff like that, but then you start receiving coaching and they disassemble the game into its constituent parts. And they take each of the parts and you practice dribbling and you practice 15-foot jumpers and layups and chest passes. You run around a little bit to build up some stamina, and then the state of the art is you practice all of these discrete skills and you put them together in a game environment, right? And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And again, we have a lot of academic medical research behind all of these things, clinical research, I should say, behind these things, this advancement that we've done with Playmaster.
And you think you can extend this to all the popular games relatively easily, Vincent? Like, is this the goal for this platform? Is it to stay focused on Counter-Strike for now, or what is?
Well, Counter-Strike's been around for a long time, and I would posit that if you ask someone where does like square one skills for FPS games come from, they will say Counter-Strike.
Yes.
So I would believe that yes, the skills are transferable. Moving beyond the FPS genre, it'll be different, right? I mean, like taking on something like Dota 2, right, will be it's a completely different animal, right? Because if you think about Counter-Strike, it's 20% strategy, 80% reaction time and targeting and things like that. And Dota is exactly the opposite, right? It's 80% strategy, 20% reaction time. It's all planning and stuff like that. So and that's been a really fun ride, is because that area is so ambiguous. Who knows where it's going to go.
From a marketing standpoint, you guys have partnered with esports pros on the accessory side. Is this something you would partner with big esports pros, you think, in the long run? Is that part of the plans here for Playmaster?
Yeah, I think definitely. In fact, we, back to, and I did give the short version because I was trying to save time, but I'm glad Vincent added to it because there's a lot that went into it. And back to that clinical research, we actually tested extensive testing around esports pros and then regular players to see what were the traits that differentiated an esports pro from a regular player, and can those traits be honed and tested and trained so that you could get to that next level. So yeah, we're working really closely with a lot of our teams, and we're going to continue to work closely with our teams on Playmaster to perfect it and make it even better.
Science wins games, right, guys?
Game with passion, win with science. I'm going to go back all the way 6 years.
But I think NVIDIA also has a similar slogan, right? It's frames win games.
Oh, they stole that from me then after I came
I
here.
thought you came up with that. I just assumed you came. Guys, before we wrap up, I just want to do one super quick story because it's so relevant to you guys. And that's a story from TheVerge.com. The headline here was Gabe Newell has big plans for brain-computer interfaces in gaming. He says Valve isn't close to releasing a commercial product yet. First of all, are you guys much closer than Valve to a commercial product? No. And Vincent specifically, what can you announce on the no? But curious, the article is obviously about new ways of interfacing with games, and here he's talking about literally plugging your brain directly into the game in a read and write fashion. In other words, your brain can influence the game, and the game can sort of then write back to your brain. Just curious to get your thoughts on this. If you think this is so far off, it's not even worthy of discussion. If you're excited about a similar trend, or maybe other trends you're seeing in sort of new and novel interface methods that are not keyboards and mice and joysticks and things like that.
Well, the only thing I'll say first, sorry to interrupt you, Josh, is it has to be wireless. It can't be wired.
Yeah.
We don't want to be tethered.
Yeah, no, this article got passed around, as you can imagine, to our
Sure.
entire team, and I read it the other night, and I don't know about the right back. I'm not sure how comfortable I feel about that. You know, Bob. What was the example he gave? Bob got hacked, and he's still running around naked through the woods. So I don't think I want to be Bob per se. But you know, I've said this in the past, where I think, and not that I came up with it. It's articles I've read, the game developer conference and stuff like that. That game developers, I think it makes sense for them, because today it's like you've got the easy setting, or you've got the I'm going to torture you because you're a sadomasochist setting, and then the gamers, there's always the debate and like, oh, that game was too easy. And I tend to fall into the I'm old. I've got enough stress at work. Can I just have my game be fun? Like, give me the easy mode so I can be the hero and just have fun. And I hate it when it's like super, super hard. But I think something like this could be interesting, where if you're tied in wirelessly, that and you're struggling, the game developer knows that, and they can slowly ratchet down the difficulty level. I think something that Gabe talked about. So you also don't feel, you know, because there's also a sense of accomplishment. You don't want to feel like I'm playing on the easy mode. Like if you could play in this mode and they slowly ratchet it down, but you're struggling, but just enough that you can still win, that gives you a sense of accomplishment. I think that's something that a brain computer interface could give you. I think the other example he gave, there's a scene where you're getting bored, you know, they could add more excitement to it. They could understand if there was like especially supposed to be an emotional moment, is it working? And I think the real question is it going to make it into the hands of consumers? Maybe not right away, probably not right away, but I could see it making it into the hands of the developers in their beta testing. So as they're building the game, they're doing a lot of this testing so they can really hone the game the right way, so that when it ships, they tested all the different emotions and they know what they were hoping to get out of that scene has worked. But yeah, I think it's super interesting. You know, a lot more research to be done there, but I do believe, Gabe, that as a game developer, if you're not thinking about that in the future, you are going to be left behind.
You just internally, how much though, like how many resources, dollars, effort, thinking, time is spent on like the out there kind of stuff, right? Is there any piece of your group that's sort of not focused on mice and keyboards and is just, you know, thinking about what's next? What far out thing might we use next?
We do. There's a whole group within our team that is we call them the innovation team, and they're looking at where the future is 5 years from now, 10 years from now. They're future casting. I'm not going to share the size of the team or how much money we put to that, but it is a fair chunk, because that's how you stay ahead, right? And that's where some of these failures that you mentioned earlier happen, right? Because that's where you take some more risk and you're prototyping things and you're trying things in what I call the dev kitchen. And you look at it and some ideas are good. Some ideas are like, okay, well, not that, but there's something there, keep going. And other ideas are like, oh man, that's awesome. We got to quickly get that into a product, you know? So, but yeah, we're definitely looking at that.
Guys, thank you so much for that wraps up essentially this podcast. I can't thank both of you enough for being on, for answering all our questions. Like I said, easily the best guests we've ever had. I probably could have stretched this out another hour, and our listeners are maybe moaning that I'm not. But thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate it. Would love to have you guys back anytime you want. To our listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Make sure, don't forget, the podcast comes out every Thursday. We do a live stream every Wednesday evening, 8:30 Eastern time. Follow us on TikTok. We have a new account, is Esports. William does a bunch of dancing on there. It's really great.
I was going to say, does William have a dance?
I play Dance Dance Revolution. That's what we're waiting for.
If you don't sign up for our TikTok account, I will get William to dance on it. You do not want to see that happen.
I'm actually good at Dance Dance Revolution. I'm telling you, it's true. It's true.
And this week we're starting a new series on Clubhouse. If you're on Clubhouse, our Future of Fun Fridays hosted by the Business of Esports. I'll be there. William will be there. We'll have a bunch of our friends there. Fridays, 3 p.m. Eastern time, every Friday on Clubhouse, guys. Thank you for listening. Don't forget, tell your friends about the podcast. Leave that 5-star rating and review, and we will see you guys next week.